Hi, I'm Mo, and I'm really glad you're here today. I thought I would do a review of the new Anastasia Beverly Hills Luminous Skin Foundation. I mentioned this in my haul that I did Monday night. I did an Ulta haul, and I've worn it 4 different times, and I've got my pretty clear opinions on it, and I've done it kind of some different ways and that kind of thing. Because as I've mentioned, I really don't prefer first impressions. For me, they're not that helpful. I'd rather get kind of a review after someone's worn it for a while, so that's what I'm going to do. Let's just start with kind of the basics. It is a glass bottle. It has a pump. I appreciate both of those things. It's not a locking pump. That's one thing I wanted to point out. It just kind of spins around, so it's not like you can lock it underneath the lid for travel if that's important to you. It's 1 fluid ounce, which is, again, that's just the standard size, 30 milliliters, whichever. They're the same amount. And I chose the shade 150W. Typically, I'm neutral or neutral cool, so this was a surprising choice for me since it's W, which means warm. It was the most neutral that I found when I went to Ulta. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts, and it's supposed to be long wearing. It is supposed to be a luminous foundation. It's supposed to blur and perfect the things that many foundations are supposed to do, right? I've used it, as I said, 4 times. The first day I wore it with no primer, which I typically do when I'm testing a foundation, and that day I just felt like my skin had more texture than I even realized I had. It surprised me quite a bit. I'd say I used a full pump, and I think I used my Zoeva 110 brush, which is small. It's a small foundation brush, but if it's good enough for Lisa Eldridge, by golly, it's good enough for me. So that was the first day, and I will say that the wear time is pretty good. I feel like I've gotten 11, 12 hours out consistently over each day. I don't really have any complaints about that. So the next day I thought, okay, well, obviously my pores are really showing. Maybe I just need a primer. So then I pulled out my Hourglass Veil Mineral Primer. It improved things, and I still used about a pump of foundation, and that day I used my It Cosmetics foundation brush. So, more dense, flat, larger brush. I didn't think the brush made a huge difference, and that day I thought it was better, a little better. I didn't think it was quite, the texture was quite as evident. I don't feel like either day my skin felt particularly or looked particularly luminous. I wasn't really getting a glow. It didn't look flat, certainly, but I thought it was a pretty, I don't know, satin maybe I'd say is the finish. I don't find it all that luminous. Then yesterday I got out my beauty blender, and I also again used the Hourglass primer, used my beauty blender, and I used about 2 pumps of foundation because I really wasn't getting quite the coverage that I wanted, and I'm pretty standardly a medium coverage person. So I thought it was, again, a little better. I did prefer it with the beauty blender. So I prefer putting this particular foundation on with a beauty blender, and I am usually a brush or a fingers person. So that was unusual for me, but that's okay. I'll kind of test it with whatever it needs to be tested with. And then today I again used the beauty blender. I chose to use my Master Blur Stick from Maybelline because I really thought, okay, let's see if I can get my pores to not be so evident. And I like this primer for that purpose. It did a pretty good job, but still, I'm just not seeing, like, to me, my skin just seems to have an unusual amount of texture when I use this foundation. You can definitely see it on my forehead. You can see it kind of, along my nose and along my cheeks where, this is where my pores are certainly most prominent. And I've had the foundation on today for about 10 hours now, so it's still on. It's wearing pretty decently. I did have my glasses on, so there might be some wear marks right here, but I would expect that really with almost any foundation. So I like the bottle, I like the pump. As you know, I don't love this huge foundation on the one side. I don't think it fits the ABH brand, but that's just a totally aesthetic thing that doesn't really matter. I found this tricky to color match, and I don't think I'm the only person who's saying that. I went to the store and I put all kinds of pumps on my hand and my underside of my arm to try to find a match, and I'm pretty good at matching foundation just by eye. And this was a little lighter than I wanted. And again, it's classified as warm, but for me, it had more of a neutral undertone. So that was a bit tricky to figure out. And for me, this foundation really isn't luminous and it really brings out my texture. So for me, it's not really a win because I feel as if it's a lot of extra work. A beauty blender's extra work for me. Like 2 pumps is more than I typically use. It was tricky to find the shade I wanted. And just in general, I don't love this foundation. I don't hate it. It's certainly not the worst foundation I've ever tried, but it's very non-spectacular, and there's parts of it I actually don't like. So for me, this is not a foundation that I'm really enjoying. And I kind of hoped, you know, I guess you always hope, like you buy a new foundation, particularly one that's in the price range of this, which is just under $40, because to me, that's a hefty price tag for a foundation. And I'm not in love with it, and that's a bit of a disappointment. So I wanted to let you know my thoughts on this in case that's helpful to you, which is really my only purpose, is just to kind of hang out and talk makeup and, you know, let you know what I think of things or how they work on me, because I'm just like a regular person wearing regular makeup and I don't have any fancy lights. There's no like magic around me. So this is what it looks like on me. I don't think I'll be using this foundation a lot. In fact, I'm considering taking it back, which I don't like to take things back. I typically don't do that, but I'm considering it. So that is my review of the Anastasia Beverly Hills Luminous Foundation. Not quite my cup of tea, which is not to say it is not yours. My skin, I should mention, by the way, is normal to dry leaning. And that's changed in the last 6 months or so. So I'm still kind of learning to adjust to that. But just so you know, in case that's helpful for reference for you. Thanks a lot for hanging out and talking about makeup with me. I really love that and I appreciate your time. And I'll talk to you soon.